Why does life feel heavier now that it's finally supposed to be lighter? You've given your best years to others. You've shown up, held steady, endured storms without letting the world see you shake. And now, when the world has quieted, when there's more time to rest, to breathe, to just be, something inside still feels tired. But it's not the body alone. It's the soul. You've survived so much. So why does peace still feel out of reach? Why do small things cut so deeply now? A forgotten phone call, a quiet birthday, the chair that stays empty no matter how many times you look over at it. This isn't weakness. It's weight. The weight of all that was postponed, all that was never named, all that you had to hold for too long. And Buddhist wisdom doesn't ask you to let it go instantly. It simply invites you to look at it differently. In this video, we're not going to fix aging. We're going to walk with it, through the silence, through the slow mornings, through the ache in your knees and the ache in your heart. Because the heaviness you feel isn't the end of your story. It might be the threshold. If you stay with me till the end, I'll share one truth that most people miss about aging, and it just might change the way you carry everything. This isn't a lecture. This is your story, and you're not alone. If something in this already speaks to the part of you no one sees, hit subscribe. Every week, we return here together, quietly, honestly, like old friends who don't need to pretend anymore. Truth 1, the weight you never knew you were carrying. Why does life feel heavier now that you're finally free? You spent your whole life waiting for this moment, when the noise would settle, when the responsibilities would soften, when the world would stop asking so much of you. You thought freedom would come with lightness, like finally dropping the heavy bag at the side of the road. But instead, you wake up, and the weight is still there. Only now it's quieter, harder to name. There's no boss breathing down your neck, no children pulling at your sleeve, no alarm clock dictating who you must become today. And yet, when you walk through the house, the silence feels heavier than sound. Harold retired last year. His last day at the office, they threw a party with balloons and a store-bought cake. He smiled in the pictures, shook the hands, accepted the gold watch. Then he came home, sat down on his porch with a mug of tea, and waited for something to lift. It never did. Diane lost her husband 7 years ago. Her daughter calls once a week. The grandkids send postcards. She makes soup for one and turns on the television just for the sound. Sometimes, she'll walk into a room and forget why she came. But what she never forgets is the ache that follows her from morning into dusk. And if you asked her what hurts, she wouldn't be able to tell you. Because it's not a sharp pain. It's not a wound. It's not even sadness. It's more like gravity. A quiet pull, inward, downward. Like carrying something she can't quite see. And maybe that's the most exhausting weight of all. The one we carry without knowing it. The Buddha said, "Nothing ever exists entirely alone. Everything is in relation to everything else." So perhaps this heaviness is not just about now. Perhaps it's the accumulation of years, of stories half finished, of dreams deferred, of losses not fully grieved because we were too busy surviving. It's the tiredness that comes not from what we did, but from what we held in all that time. The expectations we never questioned. The roles we never wanted but wore like uniforms. The versions of ourselves we kept performing long after the audience had gone. And now, in the stillness, it all arrives. Every moment we push through, every emotion we postponed. They come knocking at the door not to haunt us, but to be felt, finally. Because now there is space. Space to feel, space to hear, space to stop pretending that everything was fine, that we were fine. And that's when the truth begins to whisper. Maybe the heaviness is not a sign of weakness, not a punishment, not even a mistake. Maybe it's the invitation, the first real one, to lay it all down, not just the past, but the performance, to sit with what's left and feel the weight, not to fight it, not to fix it, but to finally name it, that you are tired, that you've carried so much, that you deserve to rest, not in escape, but in truth, because this too is life, not a detour, not a decline, but the next turning of the wheel. So before we rush to let it go, maybe we can ask, what if the heaviness isn't the problem, but the invitation? Truth 2, your body isn't failing you. It's speaking a new language. There's a moment, quiet, almost forgettable, when you reach for your keys and fumble. It takes just a second longer than it used to. You laugh it off, maybe with a joke about getting old. But something about that moment stays with you. Not because it hurts, but because it feels like a message you don't quite understand. You look in the mirror and notice how your eyes have changed. Not just the wrinkles, but the softness behind them. You sit down and feel the creak in your knees, the way your hands move more carefully now. You wonder when you started walking slower. You wonder when stairs became mountains. You wonder if your body is betraying you. But what if it's not betrayal at all? What if it's a new language, one you've never been taught, but that has always been whispering underneath the surface? For decades, you rushed. You woke before your body was ready, pushed through the headaches, the colds, the tension in your shoulders, the clenching in your jaw. You ignored the ache in your back, the way your stomach churned when you said yes but meant no. You silenced the signals because life needed you to keep going. Now, your body isn't whispering anymore. It's speaking clearly, through slowness, through tightness, through tremble, not to punish you, but to invite you, to stop, to listen, to begin again. The Buddha taught that the body is a field of awareness, a place of practice. But we were never taught to love it, only to use it or fix it. So we treated it like a machine, surprised when it rusted. But your body isn't a machine. It's a temple, a house you've lived in every day without really stopping to look around. And now it's asking to be seen. The ache in your hip isn't failure, it's memory. The shaking in your hand isn't weakness. It's time, rippling through your skin. Your body is not falling apart. It's rearranging itself around a new way of being. A way that is softer, slower, more awake. Like a tree bending in the wind. Not broken, just changed. Like a stream that moves more gently around the rocks. Not because it's lost strength, but because it's learned grace. There is wisdom in this slowness. The monks in the forest monasteries take one step at a time, barefoot, feeling the ground with every inch of their soul. Not because they cannot walk faster, but because they choose not to. Because when you move slowly, the world unfolds differently. Maybe your body is asking you to see again, to touch life without rushing through it, to taste your food without distraction, to breathe in the morning air without already thinking of the next task. Maybe it's saying, you don't have to earn your worth anymore. You already are. There's a story of an old Zen nun who could no longer sit cross-legged. Her knees ached, her back curved. One day, she simply laid down under a tree and breathed. Someone asked if she missed meditation. She smiled and said, "This is the deepest sitting I've ever done." She wasn't less spiritual. She wasn't less whole. She was just fluent in a new language, the language of age, of stillness, of surrender. So when your joints creak, when your strength fades, when you feel the shape of your body shifting like a coastline after years of waves, don't look away. Don't shame it. Don't wish for the past. Place your hand on your chest. Feel your own pulse. And remember, this is your body speaking, maybe for the first time in a voice you're finally ready to hear. When did you stop listening? To the one who's been with you all along, your body. Truth 3, you lost people, but you didn't lose yourself. There's an emptiness that doesn't echo, only lingers. You walk into a room and something's missing, but it isn't a thing. It's a presence. The weight of someone who used to be there. The way they stirred the coffee just so, the way they answered without words, the way the silence felt different when they were in it with you. Now the silence is louder, colder, more still. You sit down across from a chair that no one uses anymore. Dust gathers in corners of the house you stopped cleaning because no one visits them. And on some nights, you turn on the radio just to trick the air into feeling alive again. It's not just grief over the people who are gone. It's grief over the way you don't recognize yourself without them. Like part of you only existed in their eyes. The version of you who made them laugh, who sat beside them in quiet understanding, who waited for their footsteps, who kept the tea warm just in case. Where does that version go when they go? And yet somehow you're still here, still waking, still breathing, still making it through days that no one prepared you for. You thought the hardest part was losing them, But it turns out the harder part is remembering how to be when you are no longer needed in the same way, when you are no longer seen in the same light. That's the loneliness no one tells you about. Not being alone, but being unwitnessed. But what if there is still someone left who needs to see you? What if the grief is not asking you to let go of them, but to finally reach toward the version of you that stayed? Because you didn't leave, you stayed. Through the empty rooms, through the anniversaries spent alone, through the holidays you cooked for one, through the tears you wiped quietly so no one would worry. You stayed. You adapted. You bore it. You made it sacred even when no one was watching. And that version of you, the one still standing, that version has something to say. Not just about survival, but about transformation. Not just about missing someone, but about meeting yourself where they left you. There's an old photo on the shelf. You stare at it longer than you admit. They're smiling. You're younger. Everything seems possible. And something inside you whispers, that version of me is still in here somewhere. Maybe older now, softer, wiser, but still whole, still waiting to be claimed. You haven't lost yourself. You've just been walking beside grief for so long, you forgot that it wasn't your name. The Buddha once said, you can search the entire universe and not find a single being more worthy of your love than yourself. Maybe now, in this chapter, that love begins with recognition. A gentle nod toward the soul who weathered all the storms, who stayed, who still sets the table even when no one comes, who still makes the tea just in case. Maybe grief isn't about letting go of them, but meeting the version of you that stayed. Truth 4, you're not too late, you're right on time. There's a lie that drips slowly into our minds as we grow older, like water on stone. It says the best parts of your life are behind you, that your chances have passed, that your time to bloom, to love, to begin again, has closed its door. And so you begin to shrink yourself to match that idea. You talk less about your dreams. You fold the edges of your desires into more polite shapes. You move through each day like you're at the end of a long hallway with no doors left to open. But that's not how life works. Not in the way the dharma sees it. Not in the way truth reveals itself. Because if you take a step outside, not just literally but inwardly, you'll notice something surprising. There are gardens that don't bloom until late summer. There are trees that bear fruit long after spring has gone. There are stars we don't even see until they're already light years away, shining just now into our sky. You are not late. You are on time for this moment, for the version of life that can only be lived after everything else has been stripped away. There's a small garden behind Harold's house. For years, he let it go wild. Weeds climbing the fence, soil dry and cracked. He used to say, "What's the point now?" But one afternoon, without fanfare, he walked outside and pulled a single weed. Just one. The next day, another. A week later, he planted basil. No one noticed, but he did. His hands remembered. The soil didn't ask what year it was. It just opened, waiting, and so did he. Because the truth is, life doesn't ask you what you missed. It asks what you're willing to touch now. There is a room inside you that's been locked for years. Maybe you closed it yourself. Maybe someone else did. Either way, the key is still in your pocket. And behind that door isn't regret. It's potential. Not of what could have been, but of what still can be. What if your real story doesn't end with winding down, but with opening up? What if the life you were meant to live, not the one others needed from you, not the one survival required, is only just beginning? The Buddha never taught that awakening had a deadline. He only asked that we show up fully for the moment we're in. Not the one we missed. Not the one we're afraid will never come. This one, right now. The moment you stop shrinking yourself into a supporting role and remember, you are still the main character in your story. The wrinkles on your skin are not endings. They are lines of poetry written by time. The slowness in your step is not a retreat. It's the rhythm of sacred presence. And the longing you still feel, that's not foolish. That's aliveness. What would you touch again if you believed it still mattered? Truth 5. The words you never said are seeds you still hold. There are things you carry that no one can see. Not in your posture, not in your face, not even in your breath. But they live inside you, like letters never mailed, words you almost said but swallowed, feelings you almost shared but buried. They collect in quiet corners of your memory, like dust in a room no one visits anymore. You think of that one phone call you never made, the apology you rehearsed but couldn't deliver, the truth you knew but left unspoken, not out of pride, but out of fear or protection, or timing that never felt quite right. And now, as the days grow quieter, as your reflection feels more like a companion than a stranger, those words begin to stir again. You hear them when you're washing dishes, when you lie awake at 3 a.m., when the world has stopped asking things from you and your mind finally has the space to whisper. Maybe you wonder if it's too late now. Maybe the people you needed to say them to are no longer here. Or maybe they are, but the moment is gone, and you're not sure if reopening it would be a healing or a wound. But what if the words never lost their power? What if every unspoken truth is still alive, not decaying inside you, but waiting, like seeds you've been carrying in your pocket for decades, still intact, still ready, still aching for light? You don't need a grand moment to plant them. You don't need a stage. You don't even need the other person anymore. You only need a place to sit and a willingness to listen to yourself. Because the most powerful truths aren't the ones the world hears. They're the ones we finally allow ourselves to say in the silence. There is no expiration date on honesty. There is no age limit on expression. The Buddha once said, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." And maybe, in this season of life, peace doesn't come from being heard. Maybe it comes from hearing yourself. Diane once wrote a letter to her sister who had passed away 30 years before. She never sent it, but she read it aloud, alone, under the same tree they used to play beneath as children. She cried. Then she smiled. The letter didn't fix anything. It didn't erase the past, but it returned her to a version of herself who still had something to say. That's the miracle of unspoken words. They don't disappear. They wait for you to be ready. And when you are, they don't shout, they don't demand. They just unfold, like petals you thought had dried, blooming again in your own voice. So if there are words still living in your chest, say them, even if no one else hears, even if it's only between you and the wind. If no one ever hears your truth, will you still speak it to yourself? Truth 6. Stillness is not silence. It's memory returning home. There is a kind of quiet that doesn't ask for anything. It doesn't try to heal, to explain, or to impress. It just arrives like dusk, slowly, without knocking. And suddenly, you're sitting in it. A room with no sound, no story. Just the low hum of the refrigerator, the wind brushing against the curtains, the creak in the floorboards that no one else hears. You think it's silence, but it's not. It's memory, returning in its softest form. Not as regret, not even as nostalgia, but as presence. Things you forgot you remembered, moments that never got to finish breathing. The way your father closed the door gently when you fell asleep on the couch. The rhythm of your lover's fingers when they used to trace the back of your hand. The laughter of your child echoing down the hallway. They come not to haunt, but to nest. And you, without planning it, have finally become still enough to let them land. The world thinks aging is decline. But in Buddhism, stillness is not a void. It's a container. A place large enough for everything you've lived to settle into form. We spend so many years moving fast just to stay ahead of the ache. But now there is nowhere to be. No one to impress. Nothing to finish. So you sit. And in that sitting, you start to hear a voice you didn't know you missed, your own. The part of you that doesn't need fixing. Doesn't need proving, just needs witnessing. Diane once said, "I used to fill the silence because I thought it was empty. Now I see. It was full. I just hadn't slowed down enough to meet it." You don't have to meditate. You don't need to light incense or chant. Just notice the shape of your breath, the sound of the afternoon, the weight of your own hands resting. This is not doing nothing. This is remembering how to be with what is. Stillness is not silence. It is the moment your soul says, finally, you're home. You don't need to quiet your mind. You just need to listen differently. Truth 7. Peace doesn't always arrive in the shape you expected. You thought peace would be a breakthrough, something loud, something clear, a moment of pure light splitting the sky, dissolving your pain, your questions, your past. But peace, when it finally comes, is much quieter than that. It doesn't answer. It doesn't explain. It just takes a seat beside you, like an old friend who no longer needs to speak. It doesn't fix what was lost. It doesn't erase what hurt. It simply reminds you you are still here. You survived the things you were certain would undo you. You carried stories that cracked your chest open, and somehow you remained. That is peace. Not in fireworks, not in triumph, but in the moment you realize you no longer need to rush toward anything. You no longer need to carry everything. You just are. And that is enough. There's a man who walks every morning at sunrise. Same path, same pace. He stops by the same bench and sips tea from the same chip thermos. One morning, someone asked him what he thought about during his walks. He smiled and said, "Nothing in particular. I just let the world be the world." That's the kind of peace aging can bring, not because everything is resolved, but because not everything needs to be. There is a stage that appears in your later years, not made of lights or applause, but of presence. A stage where no one is watching, but you still choose to show up fully. Not to perform, but to be. The beauty is no longer in the noise, but in the noticing. The way light touches the windowsill. The way your heartbeat answers the wind. The way you don't need to know what comes next to trust that you belong in the moment that is. You don't have to transcend this life. You just have to live it all the way through. And maybe aging isn't the curtain call. Maybe it's the first time the stage is finally yours. Before the world needed you to be strong, before the titles, the roles, the expectations, there was a breath, a rhythm, a silence that belonged only to you. And maybe now, after everything, it's time to return. Not to the past, not to the younger version of you, but to the part that never left. The still, steady knowing that you were always more than what life demanded of you. Maybe peace doesn't come from lightening the load, but from finally laying it down. The regrets, the unspoken truths, the memories that still sting, the body that slows, the quiet that sometimes feels like loneliness. What if none of it means you're fading, but that you're finally arriving? You don't need to chase the light. You are the light, worn and warm and real. So now I ask you gently, what part of you is finally asking to be lived? Leave a whisper of it in the comments. You never know who might see it and feel less alone. And if this stirred something in your heart, even just a little, I invite you to subscribe. We don't rush here. We breathe. We remember. We walk this rhythm home together.